I want to first get your take in terms of when you hear the news that TMX Group had to halt trading. How do we think about this, and how do we interpret it? What exactly does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, what it means is that all securities that are traded on the TSX platforms, whether it's TSX, TSXV or Alpha, that they can no longer trade on their platforms.
And why would that happen in your mind?
Well, it's hard to say. I don't know the inside of what happened at the TSX. What I can tell you is that in the last couple of days we have seen a substantial increase in order flow in our market also over the last 2-3 days, and our teams have been following it and monitoring it very, very closely. We had some people working overnight, make sure that we're ready for the next day, because the increase in flows, I would say, was more substantial than the 150% you mentioned.
Yeah, I know. So that was early in the day, yeah. What kind of percent increase?
I would say if I look at the order flow itself, we were probably this morning looking at, and I'm talking order flow, at flows that were maybe 5 times the normal. So that was exceptional. And we had a team, sitting in an office together, our senior people monitoring what was happening and taking some preemptive measures.
Yeah, so what exactly would you be monitoring, and what kind of prevention are you looking at?
Yeah, so what you monitor is 2 things. That is one, how many orders are coming in, how is the system handling that flow, and how are you handling, from a capacity perspective, the storage of all the information related to that flow. So that is what you monitor, because a system, at the end of the day, whatever you do with a system, there's always a limit in capacity and what it can handle. So you monitor that. And then when you see that it starts to move in a direction where you start to feel uncomfortable that your system is going to be able to handle this, then you have a couple of things you can do. Typically we have in our platform what we call order throttling mechanisms, so where you start to slow down the flow that comes in, and that is going to protect your system. Or what you can also do, what we did today, is we reached out to some parties that we saw generating exceptional flow, to ask them to themselves take action, because otherwise we would have to take action, and they understood that, and they started to adjust their flow accordingly.
What do you mean? Would they be clients, or would they be other exchanges?
No, this would be clients. This would be parties that participate on our market, and they acknowledge that the flow they were sending to our systems was probably a bit disproportionate, and then they adjusted it. But it takes it takes a team to sit there and monitor 10 screens at the same time and see how all the pieces are behaving under that pressure, because there was a tremendous amount of pressure on the system.
That's what I wanted to ask you, actually, from more a human capital perspective. How much pressure and stress was there on your team?
I think it's an experienced team, so they've seen these things before, and I think they take the right decisions. Like I would say, from a personal perspective, compare that to maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I would be myself all over everyone. But I left them on their own, and they did a great job.
What do you make then of the TMX deciding to halt trading? Was it the right decision?
Well, I think it's the right decision, and again, I'm not going to put the slightest blame on them, because this can happen to everyone, and it could happen to us tomorrow, despite everything I just said. But they take the right decision, yes. What annoys me, like, to be very honest with you, I am frustrated. I'm unhappy. I think this is again a black eye for the Canadian capital markets. Because we can prevent this issue.
How?
And well, that's why I'm frustrated. I wrote about it to the regulators in 2016. When the same incident happened in 2018, you may remember, April 2018, I wrote to the regulators again, and what I kept telling them is the simple way to tackle this, like they have done it in the US, like when NYSE goes down, no one notices. And that happened, by the way, in 2017, if I remember well.
What do you mean no one notices? I remember it happening.
Oh, you remember it happening,
yeah.
But trading continued. trading just moved to all the other marketplaces. But here in
Right.
Canada, that doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen for two reasons. One, we don't have consolidated market data. So as soon as this incident happens, all people who are trading TSX listed securities or TSXV listed securities on discount brokerage platforms, and the vast majority of investment advisors have no market data anymore.
They have no prices.
They have no prices. They see no prices. They see no trades. They see no orders. Even though it trades on NEO, it trades on NASDAQ, it trades on the CSE, they don't see anything. So
Let me just
that
stop you
entire
there.
segment
Yeah.
is out of the market.
Yeah, they can see nothing, so
Nothing.
therefore they cannot possibly trade.
They cannot trade.
So why is that though? Why if you're, I'm not going to name banks, but if you're one of the banks, why wouldn't you make sure then that there's some system put in place, if you're the bank CEO, that makes sure that your investment advisors can always have access to information?
Well, it takes you back to the fact that in Canada, and we do not have, like what this SEC has mandated in the US, we don't have consolidated data. Like the regulators are not saying to all the dealers, you have to give consolidated data to all your advisors and to all your investor clients. By the way, a subsegment of the market has the data. Institutional investors were participating, professional traders were participating because they have all that data. But it's all the retail and advisors who don't have it. And why are the dealers not doing it themselves automatically? Why are they not just saying, well, we have to do this? Well, that is the one thing where I probably point the finger at the TMX, because they charge extremely high fees for their market data. So dealers feel like it's an extremely high cost if we have to put all that consolidated data and make it available. So the regulators have to step in, and they have to do something very simple. That is to say, everyone needs to provide investors with consolidated market data. And if the cost is unreasonable, let's bring the cost of market data down in Canada. Make it reasonable and take it at the same level as in the US. So that is step number one. Wrote that 2 times. I'm not going to write it a 3rd time. Like I'm going to say it very clearly. And then the second thing that needs to happen, that is when an incident like this happens. So it started around 1. I think they declared it around 1:40. And then at 3 o'clock they said, we're not opening anymore for today. Well, you can't do that either, because you hold all the orders and all the people who have orders in your system hostage for 2 hours. Like what you have to say at 1 or 1:10 or whenever you see that the problem is there, we call it for a day, so that people know that those orders are no longer held hostage in this case in the TSX systems, and they can put them on other marketplaces. Doesn't happen here in Canada, happens in the US. So it's quite fascinating. We are in 2020, and we are still experiencing things that for me are part of the dark ages. Like this is, as I said, it's a black eye for the Canadian markets. You could say, isn't it good for you?
Well, that's what I want to ask you. Did you see a spike? Did you see a spike?
Not really. Our volume continued to be the same. So people who are actively using our market continue to use our market. So we had a very active day today also, but I didn't see a specific spike. Nothing that I would immediately say. But whether there is a spike or not, it doesn't really matter. Like for me, it's not about, this is great, so we have more volume. No, this is bad for all of us. We all look, as Canadian capital market, we look, I'm going to use a very harsh word here, but we look a bit like a Mickey Mouse market. This is not serious. And I don't know what else to do than write letters and talk to the regulators and to the CSA, but they have to step in once and for all.
Well, that is the issue, though, in terms of having a really strong national regulator, is it not?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of a national regulator or provincial regulators and the CSA. Whoever it is, doesn't matter. I think that, when I wrote a letter after the incident of 2018, there was, I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do. We understand the issue and we're going to look at addressing it. Well, we're 2 years later and exactly the same is happening. And by the way, there's not going to be a closing price today.
Yeah.
And a big part of the market could not participate in the market while the market is extremely volatile and people probably want to get out of positions. A subset of the market, the professionals, could participate. Feels very unfair also. US looking at Canada is going like, what the hell is happening in that market? Like, this would not happen in the US.
Right, and I think that's a really important point too. I mean, even going back, 12 years ago, when I worked on Wall Street, there were only a few select type of individuals as hedge fund managers in the States that were willing to step into the Canadian market because they know it doesn't quite operate in the same way. It is an issue. If we want to attract volume and investors, not even just in our energy companies or whatever it is, but in our actual exchange, you can't operate like that.
That's why.
Or can you? I don't know.
That's why I'm very unhappy about it, because we're doing a lot of work, and everyone is doing a lot of work to try to attract more investors here, to try to attract more companies to list here in Canada, and then things like this. It hurts the credibility of our market. And why? Because, one, the regulators don't want to step in. And yes, I get it, the TSX wants to protect and maximize their market data revenue, but we have to think about the better good. And we can have all the discussions and debates about how do we make our capital markets better. If we don't address some of the fundamental issues like this, we won't get there.
Well, and it's so interesting as well, because all of the big Canadian banks have been putting so much money and effort into their wealth management system, which are their advisors. And from what I'm hearing from you and understanding from you, they just cut off all their advisors from trading their clients' accounts.
Yep, there's maybe 5% of the advisor community in Canada. The last time we did a survey around that, there's maybe 5% of the advisor community in Canada that has consolidated data. 95% today had nothing to see, nothing they could see.
Nothing. So for any of our advisors listening to this, what market consolidated data can they go out and ask for?
Well, I think the first thing that they can do, like they experienced it now for the second time, the first thing that they can do is say, maybe we need to get more data and more consolidated data. They should talk to their dealers and say, we have to take action. Reach out to the regulators, make the regulators mandate it, and make them also take action on making market data available at a reasonable cost. As soon as the cost is reasonable, everyone will do it. So the cost today is absolutely unreasonable in Canada. But reach out to your dealers, make your dealers reach out to the regulators, and let's come to a solution. Okay. And I think it will be much better. And this is not something that is about making NEO's life better. This is something about making the Canadian markets more credible.
Absolutely. Just one quick question before we let you go, Jos. What's your view of the markets right now with all your experience? We see 1,200 point drop essentially into the closing bells on the Dow. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think markets are markets. This is driven by, we all know what factors are driving that. Lots of uncertainty in the market. Coronavirus, is definitely having an impact on economies globally. My advice to everyone is, gold goes up, everything else goes down. It's maybe the right moment to sell your gold and buy the other stuff, because it will come back. Okay. And people always overreact.